Welcome to Chat with Sonlight, a homeschool podcast. I invite you to grab your coffee or tea and take a few moments to join us as we explore Sonlight, the curriculum, those who work behind the scenes, and the families that use it. So join us today. Hi, welcome to Chat with Sonlight. We today are going to talk about poetry, and I brought my good friend Rhonda to come in. She's like my language arts guru. All of us need a friend that knows more about a subject than the other one. That's part of being a homeschool mom, that we can't do it all. So we find our friends that have the niche that help us out. And Rhonda is one of my friends that we work in the sales team with Sonlight. You'll see her on the convention floor. So let me let her introduce herself.
Well, my name's Rhonda Helmbrech, and yes, I love it when I get to work with Jonna. We have a lot of fun, and she knows so much. And so I've enjoyed literature very much. That's probably my big old passion, and enjoy teaching that with my kids probably the most. And of course, that would be why I was so attracted to Sonlight in the first place, right? Like, oh, books, I get books. Okay, yes, I will take books.
Who doesn't love having a library of books that you get with Sonlight?
That's right.
Before we start talking about poetry, can you tell me I know the story, but can you tell our audience a little bit your background pre-homeschooling your kids?
Sure.
Your background.
Sure. Well, if we go way back, we would know that I originally went to school and got a degree as a music therapist, and actually worked with adolescents that were neglected and abused and stuff, and was able to use music and actually poetry and all kinds of different ways to access their hearts and minds instead of kind of a clinical way. And so that's where I started. And then I ended up going back and getting another degree and got a teaching degree for preschool through through grade 12. And I taught in the public realm for about 7-8 years before I pulled my own kiddos home. So, yeah.
So you recently, I know back last April, you wrote us a blog, I believe, for Sonlight on poetry. And ladies, I'll put that in the notes so you can find the link. And you and I were talking, I know it was months ago, maybe not that long ago, but maybe it was just a couple months ago, about why it's important to teach our kids poetry and not to just skip the poetry when it's your week is hectic and you just have that, it's just poetry. Why do I need it? And you and I talked about just the importance of even just reading it on a regular basis from when they're little to they're big. Can you remember what you said?
Yeah, I'll try. Yes, poetry. I like to liken poetry like I really feel like it's the music, because it's just the same way that sometimes things don't impact us when we just hear a verbal explanation of something, but if something is put in music, it heightens the experience, it makes it go deeper, fuller. And poetry really does the same thing. It has the rhythm of music, it has the rhyming, it has the scheming, it has the pattern, all those things that make music impact us. Poetry has a lot of the same kinds of things in them, and can mostly, that's what I'm going to say, is that it's accessing our hearts and our minds and our brains in a different way. I think that's why it's impactful.
Well, I was reading a commentary on poetry, and it's like putting words in an artistic form. So we're using that other side of our wordy brain, I guess.
It is. Yeah.
But instead of having to write out something or learn, the dates and all the things, or read literature, we're putting it in an artistic form. And there's so many different kinds of poetry. Everyone has their favorite, whether it's the haikus,
like a limerick or a sonnet or free verse or whatever.
Yes, all those terms. And I'm a math person, and you know that. But my grandmother could tell you a limerick on the top. She could spout out poetry and limericks to make you blush, as well as to just, run the nursing home folks crazy. She could just, on the dime, she could come up with something. But that's
wow.
I think our older generations, which they're all dying off now because, that would be 100 years, because let's age me here. But my grandparents all could remember poetry from when they
Yeah.
were in grade school. They had to memorize it, they had to recite it, they had to
Yes.
perform it, and
Yes.
still could remember it. My grandfather on the other side of the family, he played baseball, and he knew, when Casey went to bat, and
Yes.
he had that memorized, and he had tons of poetry memorized that he would tell us as
Right.
grandkids. He
Right.
could sit there and just recite it all to us that he had learned when he was our age. So,
Yes. I think sometimes it's just the accessibility in that, because with poetry, you're being asked, sometimes it's like an aria in an opera. You're being asked to, like, let's just sit right here and we're just gonna emote on this feeling for a while, and we're gonna have a whole song. And sometimes poems are like that. You're just sitting on one type of emotion, and you're going to be discussing it and looking at it from all the different directions that the poet thought of. Sometimes it's going to be the poet's going to start you in one place, and then they'll move you along,
mhm,
just like in a ballad, in a song, right? It moves you through the thoughts and feelings. And that's why it's not so much like, oh, I just don't like poetry. You may just not have found the ones that speak to you or
right,
the styles that you like. But it's important to expose somebody to a wide variety so they know what they might like.
right. So when they're little, we have them in all sorts of poetry books, like the llama who wore pajamas,
Yeah.
and um, I think that's in our first level, and then the children's
Yes.
poetry. So I brought in a book, and I think you have it too, just where they walk through this all the different variations of poetry. And
They
then
do.
as we get older, it starts. What do we do in Sunlight? We start having notes and
Mhm.
discussions, right? And I say
Yeah.
that because we haven't had those up until 2023, and it's very exciting to finally.
Yes.
There is a purpose and a reason for those of us who like to check our boxes why we had to read our
Yes.
poetry.
Yeah. And I think with the notes that are added, don't be afraid, like, oh my goodness, notes. Oh, it's not that. It's just very gentle direction, and like, oh, think about this, or taking a certain tact on a poem, or maybe giving a little piece of information about who the poet is so that you can understand where the poem is coming from,
Mhm.
and get yourself into a place of understanding. So I love that. And it's so it's not meant to be a ton of information. There's just one or two questions a day.
I was gonna say, I had a sneak peek at some, and I saw that it's just really like one or two questions, and again, we get the answer with them, do we
That's
not?
right.
So,
That's right.
I don't have to be rocket science to know that that
Mm-mm.
poetry is talking about being sad because of because something happened,
That's
versus
right.
I can know that's what it is, and I can direct my child to come to that
Right.
conclusion too.
Right. And I
So,
think it's neat too, is what you'll notice if you go through all the poetry books in Sunlight, the children will be introduced to a particular famous poem, and at a young age. Well, they're going to get it again when they're in junior high, high school, which is really quite marvelous, right? Because you've laid a foundation. They've they've seen the pattern, they've heard these words before. Well, now they've got a whole bunch more experience and understanding to themselves, and they're going to be able to go, oh, I know that one. And there may be some epiphanies for them, like, oh, whoa, I didn't know that said that. This is cool.
right. I didn't know that's what it meant. I didn't understand what that meant when I was 7 and I read it, and now that I'm 12 or 13.
Right. And it was still a fun poem probably when they were 7, because I think Sunlight's done a pretty good job, a really good job of just appropriately getting some fun, really fun things and a wide variety, and then getting eventually. Oh, should I read my moment, my poem right now? My favorite.
Yes, yes,
Okay, I will get it out. So this is How to Eat a Poem, and this is from level E.
okay. So about fifth, sixth grade.
about fifth, sixth
Sixth or
grade.
seventh grade, I think, yeah.
And surprisingly, the poem is called How to Eat a Poem.
Ooh.
Okay. So it says, I love this. Don't be polite. Bite in. Pick it up with your fingers and lick the juice that may run down your chin. It's ready and it's right now, wherever you are. You don't need a knife or a fork or a spoon or a plate or napkin or tablecloth, for there is no core or stem or rind or pit, seed or skin to throw away. In other words, don't be afraid. Just give it a try.
That's right. And you read that and all I can think of is like, when it's ripe, you eat something. And sometimes when we read a poem, like we were just saying, when they're younger, it's not quite ripe yet for the kid to get it. But now when he's older, it is. It's like eating that fresh strawberry out of you can just pop it all in your mouth and just, the juice runs down. Yes. All of it. Yeah.
Well, and I would say too, like even you mamas, when you're in there, I know you're having big discussions perhaps with the literature and things. And then you're thinking as your kids get older, well, I don't need to be in there just for this discussion of poetry. And you don't. We put in guidance, but I will say that in some of these poems, there's just such an opportunity of richness for you to be really talking about some pretty deep things as in those older years of poetry.
Right.
With your child, and that mentorship that can happen it's use it for that. I mean, it's neat. And often in the notes we added, when it was appropriate, we added scripture to it when it worked, and when it seemed to just bring such a depth to it. And so I think you could really bring out some things that you may not normally talk about with your children. And that's why I would say it's not the time to jump out when they're 15. Do jump in some days if you can.
When you hit that junior high school time, and it's the ideal time to make our independent children be able to do the work on their own, and you just catch up with them. But having those discussions, you've gone from the light discussions that you had younger to now you really have to prod and make it a deeper discussion, so that and it doesn't matter if it's their literature or if it's their poetry, which is literature, but as a mom spending that time maybe reading the poetry too, why not? I bet I would say I bet I have not read every poem that my kids have read.
I didn't either. No. I had 5 kids, right? I didn't, but maybe sometimes if you could just glance it over. And I think the thing is like, you don't have to be afraid as the mom, like, well, I don't know. I didn't study this. You don't have to, because the notes are there. We went to the essence of what the discussion would be for the most part in a lot of the notes. So the support's there. And you'll be able to go with it. And
you can use the notes as a mom cheat sheet to know when the topics are going to be deep that you should cover with your kids. Because what's going on with my kids is not what's going on with Rhonda's kids.
That's right. That's right. You would maybe pick something else to talk about than I would.
Right.
Yep. Yes, absolutely.
So Rhonda, do you have any words of advice for these mamas that are listening about poetry?
Yes. I think the biggest thing is just remember that the poetry is not torture, for one, and just enjoy it. And sometimes it takes more than one reading. And by you modeling, especially when they're younger, it's important to hear the words out loud and not just read them silently, because you're going to miss the rhythm. You're going to miss the sounds. You're going to miss the alliteration. You're going to miss the assonance or whatever is going on in that poem. And sometimes if you're reading it out loud, then you get the opportunity to hear the figurative language, not just see it, but you hear it. And then the imagery, right? Like all those things are going to come about. So that's what I would say is like, don't be afraid. Think of this as, okay, this is really, but playtime. You're playing with the words. You're playing with the sounds, especially in those younger years. Like play, enjoy.
It's word painting. Instead
Yes.
of finger painting, you're word painting.
We're mushing in the paint. I do like that. Yeah. Okay. It's like eating that poem. Just bite in,
Bite in and get off.
enjoy. That's why those younger years too, if it's like a poem the kids should be moving, then y'all should get up and move.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. And if you ever get to a point where you're stuck with a poem, then like up for an older year, then look up what type it is, or look up the author real quick. Author,
yeah.
poet.
Yeah,
look
he's an
up
author of the poetry, so
that's right. So that you have a clue and you can kind of lead. Again, in the notes we really kind of do that, but if you need a little bit more, it's a 1-second Google search.
Right. So so if your child enjoys a certain set of poetry and they go off to the library and find a new poetry book, that would be exactly, find the context that this poet put all these words into. If I let my kid go off and read a book, I would want to know as they're reading it, especially when they're high school, you got to let them have some independence, but who wrote the book? Why are we doing that?
That's right.
I'm going to let you read it, but I need to know where it came from.
Right. Maybe I should sneak the one from 130.
Sure.
Should we sneak that in? So what's neat about this particular book, this is more transitional high school is what I would call it. This book is really amazing. It's all, of course, American poets because it's from the American year. But what I really enjoy about it is it actually put pretty extensive notes that are interesting to read about the different American poets that are in here. And then the other beautiful thing, and many of those Sonlight books do this, they also have some really cool pieces of artwork. And I just love this. And this one's called The Jazz Man. Well, you can feel it, see it, hear it. And then the words will just bring that to life. And so some of these books are just amazing because they did do like poetry is art. They put art with the art.
Yeah. They complemented the art with the art.
Yes, they did. I love that.
We're smooshing the paint. So don't get discouraged. Those are great books. I love that. I remember that this one is in one of our, do you remember what level this one is?
Yeah, that is G.
So it's not quite high school, but it's really thick and it can be intimidating. And my kids, my boys especially, were, Mom, not that one. But they did enjoy the book and they loved, my youngest one, sometimes I was telling Rhonda not too long ago, I had to make him bounce on the trampoline when he read some of the poetry just to make him focus on it and do it. But
that's awesome. That's so good. Yeah. Movement. It should happen.
It should happen. And sometimes it has to happen while you're reading poetry. So it's Actually, I made him, he would sit out in my husband's office and bounce on it and read it to my husband so I could go do something else.
That's great. Oh, I know what I forgot. Speaking of that, I think one of the best things you can do is if there's a poem that your child really likes. The best thing that you can do. Remember, we read the poem about just bite right in.
Right.
Honestly, if there's one that tickles their fancy, having them memorize it and perform it, that's one of the best things you can do.
So yeah,
they're feeling the rhythm, they're singing the rhythm, they're saying the rhythms. Eventually you're going to get into free verse for the older kids, but still, even memorizing one of those, it's really meaningful to them.
And a lot of our co-ops and stuff, not everyone's in a co-op, but if you're in a co-op, a lot of times they have presentation days. Your kid can go and present this poetry, or if you have a small group that meets in your house, a Bible study, even that it's just all the adults. You can while we're setting up, could you recite to all these people? Give them practice in front of people as well.
Exactly.
On top of being able to find their favorite, maybe not the one you want, but the one that they want.
Yes, that they're responsive to. Yeah. And I do enjoy it. And I do that with my high schoolers. I make them memorize a poem every semester. And I make them perform it in front of people. And it's just good for them too, just public speaking, They don't have to think about the words, they're there. And it's just interesting sometimes. Like I'll suggest, like, let's do Shakespeare sonnets or something. And it's interesting. Some of them will like, well, could I do this? And they do get into it and they find the one that means something to them.
Well, Rhonda, I thank you for today. I thank you for all the work you've put into updating our levels and putting in the notes and stuff. I'm so excited to see it coming out this year. I feel like
it was fun. It was really fun.
So if you guys are at a convention where one of us are working, be sure you stop and say hello to Rhonda. Tell her that you listened to the poetry episode. She would gladly let you talk her ear, and she'll tell you all the things again. But I'm very excited about this. I'm excited to see you guys soon. Remember, at any time that you guys have a suggestion for us, or that you have comments for us or questions about this episode, you can send it to connections@sonlight.com. And I look forward to hearing from you guys soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.